morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our side event, bringing deinstitutionalization back on the agenda, organized by the Global Coalition for Deinstitutionalization. Before we start, I would just like to share with you some housekeeping information. I will kindly ask all the speakers to speak slowly for effective interpretation. We have interpretation in French and international sign language. We also have closed captioning if you need it. You can choose that using the button below for closed captioning and interpretation. So please the channel you want. Also, please turn off the videos for better audio quality. This is for speakers when you're not speaking. And mute your microphones to reduce background noise. This is all to ensure good quality interpretation for everyone. So thank you very much. Now I would like to welcome you all again. The Global Coalition on Deinstitutionalization is formed by major disability rights groups, which are European Network for Independent Living, Inclusion International, International Disability Alliance, Transforming Communities for Inclusion, Disability Rights Fund and Disability Rights Advocacy Fund, Center for Human Rights at University at Pretoria, Validity Foundation, and my organization, Disability Rights International. My name is Dragana Milovanovic, and I'm a director of European programs of Disability Rights International. And as a representative of organization who has been following the situation and documenting human rights abuses in institutions for over 30 years, it is a genuine pleasure to see the movement for deinstitutionalization grow, and which is, I think, culminating now with the process of developing UN guidelines on deinstitutionalization and having so many organizations, particularly organizations of persons with disabilities, coming together and asking for urgent action for deinstitutionalization. The situation in institutions has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen that people with disabilities in institutional settings have been disproportionately affected by this pandemic. And that is why it is really important to start deinstitutionalization immediately. And of course, having in mind emergency aspect and the urgency of this process to start now. At the beginning, we will show a pre-recorded video prepared for us by Judy Human. Judy Human is a lifelong advocate for the rights of disabled people. She has been instrumental in the development and implementation of legislation, such as Section 504, the Individuals with Education Act, the Americans with Disability Act, the Rehabilitation Act, and the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Her memoir, Being Human, an unrepented memoir of a disability rights activist, co-authored by Kristen Joyner, was published in 2020. She is also featured in the Oscar-nominated documentary Creep Camp, Disability Revolution, directed by James LeBret and Nicole Newman. Judy produces a podcast called The Human Perspective, which features a variety of members from the disability community. Judy serves on a number of nonprofit boards, including the American Association of People with Disabilities, the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, Humanity and Inclusion, and Human Rights Watch. She has 20 years of nonprofit experience working with various disability organizations, including being a founding member of the Berkeley Center for Independent Living. Prior to starting the Judith Human LLC, she served in the Clinton and Obama administrations.
This is Eric Rosenthal. I'm the Executive Director of Disability Rights International, and I have the great pleasure of introducing today the Honorable Judy Heumann, a good friend and US activist. Judy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, as Eric said, I'm the Honorable Judith Heumann, and my honorable title comes because I was an assistant secretary, or internationally like a deputy minister, and my position was confirmed by the Senate. I was very excited when you asked me, Eric, to speak, because the issue of deinstitutionalization, keeping children out of orphanages, integrated in the community, has been something that I've been engaged in my entire life, both personally and professionally. And then I worked at the State Department in the Obama administration as the Special Advisor for International Disability Rights.
Thank you. Your voice on this over the years has been just so important, so invaluable, and we appreciate you speaking out and joining us today. What would be your main message to governments about what they need to do in light of the current situation facing 10 million children in institutions and countless adults who...
I think we're in a position now where organizations like yours and other disability rights groups domestically and globally have really been pushing both the communities and government on what is wrong with segregation, whether it's in education or people being put in institutions or orphanages from young to old. It really produces terrible outcomes, both for disabled people, and I think, quite frankly, for many of the staff that are working in these situations, where they clearly know that these individuals have much more capacity than many think. We need strengthening of disability rights organizations to be able to be stronger advocates. In too many cases, disability rights groups don't yet know enough about the role of government and how government functions. And as one who worked both on the outside as an advocate and then has worked in government for a number of decades, it really is important to marry the two together so that people can really be speaking in a knowledgeable way and not be blown off by government people who believe that you don't really know what you're talking about, so they'll have a meeting with you and be done with it. I look at increasing the funding for disability rights organizations. And when I worked in the Clinton administration, we did that, and some other administrations since then. You know, my experiences of being denied the right to go to school, and then when I finally started going to school when I was 9 years old, only being in segregated educational classes with an inferior education. But in the United States in the early 1970s, there was an institution called Willowbrook State School for the quote unquote mentally retarded. And there was a huge scandal. And I became friends with some of the organizers who were working on closing down the institution. And so it was the first time that I ever got to visit an institution. And it really was from that day forward that the abhorrent conditions that young children and teenagers and older people were living in were so inhumane that there was no way, as a disability rights advocate, that I could not continue to raise these voices of people who really, in so many ways, had their voices totally minimized.
Yeah.
But the very important aspect, groups like the International Disability Alliance and their members are speaking up and speaking out and are working with governments to really work harder on making a difference. But this is something that none of us want to live in, and we should not be supporting a place that we would not want to put our children or ourselves.
Oh.
Well, my mother, I found out when I was 36 years old that a doctor had recommended that I be put in an institution. And my mother had made my father promise that he would never tell me that. And when I was 36 years old, he told me.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, that can't be possible.
Yeah.
And my mother confirmed it.
Well,
but
your
I
mom was a
also,
strong woman. Thank God for her, who knew not to listen to the doctor.
and I think also because, my parents are German Jewish refugees, and knowing what had gone on in Germany during the Holocaust and the murdering of disabled children, I think that also was a strong reason.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. That's very powerful. What do you see as the opportunities now with this Disability Summit, with the global effort to support disability rights, with the sustainable development goals? What are the main opportunities for real action now?
I think we need to continue to build on the momentum, and the summit with GLAD and IDA. And when we think about the increasing number of both disabled individuals who are working in disabled people's organizations and disabled people that are now also working in government, and the number of government employees in many countries in development who really are also becoming spokespersons for inclusion and really understanding what people in the disability community have been saying for decades. These are all very positive things. I think it's great that Norway and Ghana are hosting this summit, and between now and hopefully the next summit, I think it's really very important that Norway and Ghana and the International Disability Alliance are supporting this summit. And I do hope that there will be another summit in the next 3 to 4 years. But I also want to say that what comes out of this summit in 2022 needs to have measurable outcomes. And looking, for example, at the UN guidelines, looking at the UN guidelines on
institutionalization. Yeah,
I know. Looking at the UN guidelines on deinstitutionalization and getting those commented on and put into place will enable both civil society and governments to be held accountable. And that, I think, is what we need. It's about accountability.
Thank you. All right, I think we should wrap it up here. Thank you, Judy, for your time and for your really inspiring leadership and voice on these issues.
Thank you.
Yes, it is always very inspiring to listen to Judy, who is very often considered the mother of disability rights movement. As we all know, and we advocate that the process of deinstitutionalization is led by persons with disabilities themselves. What we also advocate for is that persons with disabilities with experience of institutionalization are also at the forefront of this process. And therefore, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Elisabeta Moldovan. She is a self-advocate from Romania. She is a board member of the European Platform of Self-Advocates. She lived in institutions for 25 years. Now she lives in the community and has been a strong advocate towards deinstitutionalization. Elisabeta, you have the floor.
Bună ziua, numele meu este Moldovan Elisabeta, sunt din România, din orașul Timișoara. Și ce să zic?
Okay, hello to you all. My name is Moldovan Elisabeta, and I live in Romania, in the city of Timișoara.
Am 3 întrebări la care aș dori să le răspund. De ce nu fac guvernele dezinstituționalizarea? Deci au tarificat convenția.
So I will try to answer in my talk to 3 questions. The first question is why don't the governments do deinstitutionalization?
Și prima întrebare este, răspunsul este pentru că nu le pasă de persoanele cu dizabilități.
And my answer is because they don't care about the persons with disabilities.
Pentru că nu cunosc ce înseamnă o instituție rezidențială.
And because they don't understand and they don't realize what it's like to live in a residential institution.
Și pentru că nu doresc, cu toate că s-a ratificat Convenția 1 în 2006, se pare că nu vor să o respecte.
And because also they ratified the UN Convention, they don't have a real commitment to implement it.
Al doilea răspuns, de ce lipsește, de ce nu avem o dezinstituționalizare reală și o incluziune reală?
And the second question is what's lacking, what's missing, and why don't we have a real deinstitutionalization and a real inclusion of the persons with disabilities?
Lipsește interesul și implicarea cu care ar trebui să fie.
So again, it's about a lack of commitment, a lack of interest, and a lack of real action.
Ar trebui să se facă training-uri, dar nu se fac.
So the staff working with the specialists, working with persons with disabilities should be trained, but these trainings are not happening.
Nu au cunoștințe despre persoanele cu dizabilități și ar trebui să lucre cu persoanele cu dizabilități care se află în instituții, cât și în comunitate.
Okay, so the specialists working with persons with disabilities should have knowledge about how to transition, help persons with disabilities to transition from an institution to life in community.
Ar trebui să facă locuințe, pentru că am văzut că în multe țări, chiar și la noi în țară, din locuințe foarte mari se fac locuințe mici și asta nu este o incluziune reală.
Another problem is the lack of appropriate houses in the community. She says that in our country, in Romania, the government builds protected houses, but these protected houses are smaller institutions. They are not real homes in the community.
Și întrebarea 3, ce le spune guvernelor? Ce scris aici? Că nu înțeleg. Că doresc să facă dezinstituționalizare, dar nu știu cum să înceapă sau cum să lucreze.
And the third question is about her message to the government that maybe want to make the institutionalization happen, but don't know how to start or are doing it wrong.
Și răspunsul este să ceară sprijinul organizațiilor, cât și persoanelor cu dizabilități.
And her message is that governments should ask help from NGOs working with persons with disabilities and to ask advice and help in this process from persons with disabilities themselves.
să ceară ajutor cum să folosească banii pentru servicii în comunitate, pentru ca fiecare persoană cu dizabilități să trăiască în comunitate, nu în centre mai mici.
And they should ask for help in the process of investing money only in services in the community.
Și să lucreze mai mult cu persoanele cu dizabilități, pentru că și ei au abilități și au cunoștințe cum să trăiască în comunitate.
Okay, and the specialists should support more the persons with disabilities and to help them value their abilities and to help them have a fuller life in the community.
Să ceară sprijin organizațiilor și să lucreze împreună cu noi, cât și cu organizațiile, pentru ca noi să-i ajutăm cum să înceapă o dezinstituționalizare.
So deinstitutionalization should start from collaboration between governments, NGOs, and persons with disabilities.
Mulțumesc!
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisabetta, for these incredibly important messages. And I sincerely hope that governments will hear your advice. I would now like to pass on the word to my dear colleague, Bhargavi Davar, from Transforming Communities for Inclusion Asia. TCI Asia is part of the global coalition on deinstitutionalization, and Bhargavi will tell us a little bit about deinstitutionalization in emergencies. Bhargavi, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dragana. I am drawing from, for my presentation, I'm drawing from the amazing work which recently came out, 19 Disability Rights Monitoring Report. A number of agencies represented here in the panel were part of this report. The present momentum within the UN and the huge participation by global civil society organizations and organizations of persons with disabilities towards consolidating an agenda and guidelines for deinstitutionalization arose from the shocking findings of this survey. I hope that all states parties take note of this report. The report drew from responses of 2,152 individuals from across 134 countries. In short, the report has horrified humanity with the findings that states have actively pursued policies which result in wide-scale violation of the rights to life and health of persons with disabilities, as well as impacting on a wide range of other rights, including right to liberty, freedom from torture, ill treatment, exploitation, violence, and abuse, the right to independent living and inclusion in the community, and to inclusive education, among others. Through the pandemic period, a position has been reached with these terrible experiences of institutionalization in times of the pandemic, that institutionalization on the basis of disability or disability-based detention per se constitutes discrimination. The axiom that congregate settings are inherently dangerous and must give way to the right to community living, of course, has been known since decades. So disaster-related institutionalization and its horrors are only one slice of a voluminous policy black hole that has existed for decades, discriminating against and causing harm to persons with disabilities. The situation of persons with disabilities within institutions outside of the pandemic, impacted by tsunami, earthquakes, floods, etc., are horrific tropes too, shared and narrated again and again worldwide by our peers with disabilities. In our daily living, persons with mental, intellectual, multiple psychosocial disabilities hold their breath and life on a fragile leash, as detention is just an insidious step away. We did not need a disaster to know the perils of institutionalization. This is a part of our everyday life experience. We appeal to states parties to change this reality for us. We are persons with disabilities. The DRM report provides evidence that the impact of institutionalization is not country specific, it is not constituency specific. The number of those institutionalized and those who have died are not small. Institutionalization is not a peculiarity. It's not a poor country phenomenon, not the result of civil war conflict or anarchy. It is being practiced by modern democratic states worldwide. It is universally found. It is pervasive. It is disability directed. It captures persons with intellectual, mental, multiple psychosocial disabilities. It captures elderly women, autistic persons, persons with leprosy, non-binary persons, persons experiencing discrimination and exclusion because of their intersectional neurodiverse identities. The report also highlights the horrendous situation for children within institutions. The number of people put at risk of life and death by institutionalization amounts to a serious policy and value failure by nations worldwide. We have known this. Now we need to find solutions. So the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities has been extended as an international policy framework for over 15 years. Public guidance for states parties to ensure the right to living in the community is, however, on the extreme slow track. Not ensuring the right to live in the community is tantamount to a full threat to the realization of all other human rights provided for by the CRPD. Governments have had a number of doors of opportunity to make plans to remove legal barriers, to project budgets through the CRPD jurisprudence, country reviews, voluntary reviews, SDG commitments. Other than a number of regional commitments, we have a Sendai, the Bivako, so on and so forth, to take corrective measures towards the realization of this human right to live in the community. Organizations of persons with disabilities make a strong appeal to build a political will to realize those commitments and to help us ensure and enjoy the right to live with dignity in the community. We in the Global Coalition for Deinstitutionalization find it very promising that the CRPD committee is supporting a very practical guideline towards DI. DI process can be humane and CRPD compliant. That is the key message of the GCDI. The work on DI guidelines is exemplary in terms of participation by organizations of persons with disabilities and their contribution. GCDI commits to a number of capacity building and support actions to governments, policymakers, and various other stakeholders to help remove barriers to an inclusive community life for all persons with disabilities. Some key recommendations include support in building capacity of bureaucracy and governments across sectors to understand the CRPD, support in urgently reviewing, repealing, and reforming harmful legislations and policies, including coercive mental health law and legal incapacity law, supporting actions to place moratoriums on the creation of new institutions, new admissions, renovations, building new wards, and so on, amplifying schemes and programs within development towards inclusion in housing, employment, education, political participation, social protection, and various other aspects of supports needed for living in the designing and piloting schemes for personal support systems and services, which will remove the risk for institutionalization, developing person-centric community-based mental health and psychosocial services and other support services, offering choices as per the will and preference of persons with disabilities, and helping in setting clear timelines and processes for states to achieve deinstitutionalization. At the GDS 2022, as a group, we commit to supporting national and intergovernmental policy efforts towards deinstitutionalization in full partnership with organizations of persons with disabilities. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bhargavi, for sharing this important information and messages that should come up from this Global Disability Summit. Our next speaker is Honorable Marie-Louise Abomo. She's a non-hierarchical magistrate in the first group and holds a doctorate in private law. After having been vice president of the Littoral Region Court of Appeal, she has been a counselor at the Judicial Chamber of the Supreme Court of Cameroon since 2007 and has chaired the criminal section of the said chamber since 2015. Focal point of the Supreme Court of Cameroon, both on human rights and HIV issues, and for the preparation of the government's periodic report on the state of human rights in Cameroon, member of the ad hoc committee for the preparation of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, former administration of Higher Regional School of Magistracy. She's also an arbitrator and has participated in various arbitration and mediation committees. She's also author of numerous publications in specialized journals. She notably contributed to the writing of a collective work on comparative law on inadequacy of the civil status system in the countries of Black Africa. Commissioner Mary-Louise Abomo, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup. J'espère que vous m'entendez. Merci beaucoup. Merci. Je présente mes respects à tous les participants. Je suis très honorée de votre invitation. Malheureusement, je ne pourrai pas rester avec vous après ça parce que je suis en pleine réunion de la commission. Ceci étant, il m'a été demandé d'évoquer la perspective des pays du Sud s'agissant des attentes vis-à-vis des lignes directrices sur la désinstitutionnalisation. S'agissant de la définition du handicap, je suis allée la chercher dans le document de l'Académie suisse des sciences médicales, intitulé « Traitement médical et prise en charge des personnes en situation de handicap » à la page 7, donc je ne vous lis pas ça, je vous donne juste la référence. Et ensuite, je suis allée voir ce que le comité des droits des personnes handicapées entend par institutionnalisation. Et j'ai compris qu'il s'agissait de toute situation dans laquelle se trouve placée la personne handicapée contre ou dans l'absence totale de sa volonté, de son consentement et de son libre choix. Par ailleurs, le comité a défini aussi ce qu'il entend par vivre de manière indépendante et être inclus dans la communauté. Nous voyons cela dans l'observation générale numéro 5, au paragraphe 8. Cette observation est de 2017. Nous pouvons donc conclure que la désinstitutionnalisation est le fait de sortir la personne handicapée de, vous m'excuserez le terme, ce carcan imposé par la société pour lui permettre d'évoluer en toute liberté. Le décor étant ainsi planté, et pour répondre à la question relative à la perspective des pays du Sud, je commencerai par relever qu'à la suite de l'entrée en vigueur de la Convention des Nations Unies relative aux droits des personnes handicapées, l'Union africaine a adopté le 29 janvier 2018, au cours de la 30e session ordinaire de sa conférence tenue à Addis Abeba, en Éthiopie, le protocole à la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples relatif aux droits des personnes handicapées. Il s'agissait pour les États africains de prendre en compte les pratiques africaines conformes aux normes internationales des droits de l'homme pour doter le continent d'un cadre normatif et institutionnel contraignant relatif à la promotion et à la protection des droits des personnes handicapées. Ce protocole, qui n'est malheureusement pas encore entré en vigueur, a vocation à s'appliquer à la personne handicapée africaine et a pour objet, je cite, de promouvoir, protéger et garantir la pleine et égale jouissance de tous les droits de l'homme et de la personne humaine par toutes les personnes handicapées et de garantir le respect de leur dignité intrinsèque. Fin de citation. C'est l'article 2 du protocole. Il faut noter que les notions d'égalité et de non-discrimination sont au cœur du protocole et fonctionnent comme le dénominateur commun dans la mise en œuvre de tous les droits et obligations contenus dans ce protocole. Cela vise à ce que le handicap ne soit pas une raison ou une justification à quelque comportement, quelque action ou une quelconque abstention d'agir de la part des parties prenantes, j'entends les États, les individus et autres, qui viendraient rompre l'égalité fondamentale entre les êtres humains. Bien plus, le protocole entend donner les orientations à suivre pour s'assurer que les incapacités générées par le handicap sont comblées par un dispositif élargi et proactif qui assurerait l'égalité entre les êtres humains, quel que soit le handicap considéré. Ainsi, parmi toutes les dispositions du protocole, l'article 14, intitulé « Droit de vie dans la communauté », apparaît comme celui qui traite directement de la question de l'institutionnalisation. En effet, cet article entend éviter, dans la mesure du possible, la ségrégation qu'induit l'institutionnalisation, considérée comme une sorte de retrait des personnes handicapées du cadre sociétal normal. Cet article, qui est donc contenu dans le protocole, lequel protocole peut se télécharger sur le site web de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, se situe dans la même mouvance que l'article 19 de la Convention internationale. Comme le protocole n'est pas encore entré en vigueur, des observations générales ne sont pas encore prises. Mais, comme je l'ai dit, ce protocole est dans la même veine que l'article 19 de la Convention internationale. Néanmoins, le protocole va plus loin dans la recherche de cette inclusion des personnes handicapées. Il en est ainsi de l'exigence de services de réinsertion communautaire pour renforcer leur participation à la vie de la communauté, de l'exigence de conditions de mobilité individuelle, de l'exigence de l'octroi d'aides subséquentes et efficientes aux centres communautaires créés ou administrés par des personnes handicapées, pour ne citer que ces quelques exigences-là. De ce qui précède, et lorsque vous aurez lu l'article 14 du protocole, comme je vous l'indique, sur le site de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, il apparaît que ce protocole qui est propre à l'Afrique ne pense pas que l'institutionnalisation soit une option capable de protéger, comme il se doit, les droits des personnes handicapées. Cela est en droite ligne avec les coutumes et les traditions de l'Afrique, où les personnes handicapées sont naturellement incluses à part entière dans les communautés, les sociétés et les familles qui les prennent en charge par de multiples mécanismes presque intuitifs, naturels et systématiques. C'est bien cette approche de la rupture de l'égalité et discriminatoire par essence qui est voulue par la désinstitutionnalisation telle que prônée par le présent webinaire et son agenda. Ainsi, les attentes des pays du Sud résident dans la prise en compte de la spécificité de la culture africaine qui ne connaît pas beaucoup les centres spéciaux modernes et autres EHPAD. D'ailleurs, de nombreux témoignages portent à croire que ces institutions se révèlent être des endroits d'aberrantes violations des droits des personnes handicapées, supposées vouloir y être mieux protégées. Le risque est énorme dans la mesure où sous le prétexte de la spécialisation et de l'expertise, ces institutions jouissent d'une présomption de bonne conduite au point d'échapper à tout contrôle de conformité. Il est donc préférable de laisser les personnes handicapées dans la communauté afin que le regard public puisse immédiatement déceler et dénoncer pour prise en compte toute situation préjudiciable à leurs droits. Aussi, les lignes directrices éviteront, elles aussi, de tomber dans le piège de l'institutionnalisation comme une autre des politiques de mimétisme systématique appliquées au continent africain. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Abomo, for this incredibly important information and perspectives from the Global South, as well as expectations from the UN guidelines on deinstitutionalization. It's been a great honor having you here on our side event. Our next speaker is Immaculada Plasencia Porrero. She's a senior expert in disability and inclusion at DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion at the European Commission. Her unit is responsible for the coordination of European policies for persons with disabilities. She works on European disability policies, including the European Disability Strategy 2010 to 2020, the EU implementation of the UN CRPD. Immaculada holds a degree in physics and computer science, and she has worked in research and development before joining the European Commission in 1991. She has worked on research programs addressing accessibility, as well as assistive technologies, and was deputy head of unit for various disability-related units in the Commission. Her work on the e-inclusion unit of the DG for Information, Society and Media addressed accessibility policy, while at the DG for Justice, she contributed to disability-related anti-discrimination legislation. She was responsible for the task force for preparation of the European Accessibility Act and remains responsible since its adoption in 2015. Currently, under the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, she is also leading the team working on the strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities 2021 to 2030. This is important perspective as European Union is the only regional body which is part of the UN CRPD, and it is with pleasure that I give word to Immaculada. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and for the invitation first, and also for the organization of this very interesting event. Let me start by saying that as a party to the convention, being my organization the focal point for its implementation, we really fully committed to the agenda of independent living. The recently adopted strategy on the rights of persons with disabilities points out to a number of policies that we have been undertaking to support persons with disabilities to live independent. Let me just start by mentioning the European Pillar of Social Rights that identifies the rights of persons with disability to living in dignity and to have the services that enable them to participate in the labor market and in society and work environment that is adapted to their needs, but to be there on equal basis with others and without discrimination. Living in the strategy shows that indeed, as said before by other speakers, the COVID pandemic has really impacted persons with disability living residential care disproportionately. And highlighted the isolation and the social distance rules, the impact that they have had. It is important to say that we will be publishing very soon reports on each member state on the impact of COVID on persons with disabilities in our website. We are supporting this work through financing a network of experts, and also we support the work by financing European level NGOs that work on independent living and deinstitutionalization. Let me say that the strategy addresses independent living of course, in the context of the convention and its implementation, but also in the chapter that it is about decent quality of life. And it says that there are more than 1 million persons, 1 million children and adults with disabilities age less than 65, and more than 2 million age 65 and over that live in institutions in the European Union. The strategy sets a number of actions to advance on the deinstitutionalization and ensuring independent living of persons with disabilities in the community. And it's evident that to achieve that independent living and achieve the deinstitutionalization, it is essential to have a landscape of quality, accessible, person-centered, affordable, community and family-based services. We need to invest on personal assistance, care and social support, as well as in accessibility and inclusion in society. Without changing the communities and making them inclusive and accessible, the process of deinstitutionalization can never be, will not be a success. We need to work on having adequate assistive technologies and to make sure that persons with disabilities, when they are able to remain living in the community, those that are living and those that are on institutions, can have the independence and the quality of the support that they need to do so. The strategy also pays a lot of attention to older persons with disabilities. Let's not forget this group, and particularly those that live in rural areas who often do not find alternatives to get the support they need at home. It is essential that to clarify that we are calling on the member states to and identifying that there is reinforced action needed to support also the regional and local authorities in their efforts towards deinstitutionalization and independent living, including using EU funds like the shared management funds, the renovation wave, and the recovery and resilience plans to improve or to support this this process. We are proposing, and we are going to be working in the coming year on guidance for recommending to member states improvements on independent living and inclusion in the community in order to enable really persons with disabilities to live in accessible, supported housing in the community, or to continue living at home, including addressing the issue of personal assistance scheme. This guidance has proved very much needed given still the challenges that we face and the need to increase the success rate for this deinstitutionalization. It is with good interest, and that we welcome the work that the UN will be doing on this on their own, on the guidance on the convention, because they will certainly feed our work and will be guiding also the work that we are doing in guiding the member states. Also, in this context, we are asking for, we will be working, on the development of a quality framework for social services, because we need to make sure that there are targeted social services, but also inclusive, disability inclusive and accessible social services in the community, to have that choice that the convention sets as a right. Without that choice, without making a reality those alternatives, the deinstitutionalization difficulty will be made a reality. So in addition, we will implement good practices in the area of mental health, and in respect to all persons with disabilities, paying attention to children and also to older persons, as I mentioned before, and securing financing for accessible and disability inclusive social housing. Housing is really a priority if we are to make the institutionalization a reality. And these are some of the actions that we are going to, that we are currently working on, and where we really need to work with the member states, but also in particular, also we will continue working with civil society, with disability organizations, and that we at European level to make sure that this work permeates at national, local, and regional and local level. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this important information, and it is always good to hear the commitment that European Union has to help the process of deinstitutionalization. It is great to hear that there will be a synchronized process of developing European guidelines, and I sincerely hope that they will go hand in hand with the UN guidelines on deinstitutionalization to help countries implement the institutionalization process. So having that said, I would like to transition slowly to the process of developing the UN guidelines, and it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Amalia Gamio. She has been the advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities for 30 years. She was part of the Mexican delegation from 2002 until the approval of the draft of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Amalia is vice chair of the committee and was one of the driving forces behind the working group on the institutionalization. Amalia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dragana. Thank you very much for the honor of inviting me to participate today with many amazing experts. We should remind many activities are linked to the development of each individual's identity and personality, where we live and with whom, what we eat, whether we like to sleep late or early at night, whether we prefer to stay at home or go out, have pets, or listen to music. Such actions and decisions between others make us who we are. Independent living is an essential part of a person's autonomy and freedom. It should be seen as freedom of choice and control, consistent with the respect for inherent dignity and individual autonomy, enshrined in Article 3.8 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Independence as a form of personal autonomy implies that the person with disabilities is not deprived of the ability to choose and control his or her way of life and daily activities. The cost of social exclusion is high, and it perpetuates dependency and interference with individual freedom. Social exclusion also breeds stigmatization, segregation, and discrimination. which can lead to violence, exploitation, and abuse. All of these conditions will fall within international law's definition of torture. Articles 15 and 16 of the Convention give obligations to protect persons with disabilities against violence, abuse, and exploitation. As we know, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities brought about a momentous paradigm shift, replacing the medical and charity approaches to disability with the human rights model of disability based on the inherent dignity and human rights of persons with disabilities. Article 19 of the Convention and its General Comment number 5 contain two concepts: the right to live independently, which is the individual dimension, and being included in the community, which refers to a social dimension. It is the positive right to create inclusive environments. The two concepts of Article 19 refer to living outside of residential institutions of all kinds, and means, above all, not losing personal choice and autonomy as a result of an imposition. Article 19 refers to both civil and political rights and economic, social, and cultural rights, and is an example of the interrelation, interdependence, and indivisibility of all human rights. Denial of civil rights of persons with disabilities leads to other forms of structural discrimination. States that continue to invest into segregated practices are violating both economical and social rights and the Convention itself. They should be making a structural transformation through harmonizing their legislation with the Convention and investing into support in independent living in the community. Many persons with disabilities placed temporarily in institutions end up being there for life. General Comment also says, neither large institutions with more than 100 residents, nor small homes with between 5 and 8 people, nor even individual homes can be called independent living systems. While institutionalized settings might vary in size, name, and organizations, they have certain inherent elements that make them institutions, like follow a routine imposed, where individuals do not have control over their lives and their day-to-day decisions. They are often subjected to forced medical intervention, or they do not have access to education, work, unemployment, and other rights. Monitoring and redress for human rights violation in these facilities is rarely carried out. With no information on the condition in which they live, persons with disabilities are left at high risk of trafficking, homelessness, exploitation, and abuse. Article 19 explicitly refers to all persons with disabilities. Neither the total or partial deprivation of any degree of legal capacity nor the level of support required can be invoked to deny or limit the right of persons with disabilities to independence. The committee has recommended to the states parties abolishing all legislation that allows the forced institutionalization of persons with disabilities, reassigning institutions' resources to community services, and, in close consultation with organizations of persons with disabilities, adopting a national strategy that includes clearly defined measurements, timelines, as well as sufficient funding, human and technical resources. Stop new entrants and not use funds to build new institutions, ensuring sufficient subsidies and deliver it directly to users. Utilize international cooperation for transition programs and community support. During the pandemic, we in the committee realized that the convention was not as well implemented as we would have liked. As we have heard from all the panelists, the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in increased isolation, deprivation of liberty, denial of adequate medical care, and deaths of persons in institutions. In many parts of the world, persons with disabilities have been triaged and left without emergency access to protective equipment, medical care, and preventative treatment. With this experience, regarding the great importance of a state's party compliance with Article 19 and its General Comment number 5, and to ensure that persons with disabilities are not segregated anymore, during the 23rd session, in the committee we established a working group on the institutionalization. In 2021, with support of Global Coalition on the Institutionalization, we have carried out public consultations with organizations of persons with disabilities in 7 regions. With more than 500 persons participate, it was the first time in the committee's history that the organizations interacted so closely with the experts. We obtained valuable input that have contributed to the guidelines on the institutionalization. These guidelines were approved by the full committee at its 25th session. The draft will be posted very soon on the website committee for everyone's considerations. Basically, Article 19 and its General Comment number 5 lets us that towards persons with disabilities, we must change the shameful protectionist approach for the very decent support approach. So many people clamoring for the institutionalization clearly shows that it is an emergency. Giving freedom and autonomy to so many adults and children with disabilities cannot be something less. We have joined forces to achieve the fulfillment to the right of persons with disabilities to live independently and to be included in the community. We call on those who have not yet joined us, on governments and academia, on society as a whole, to join us to put an end once and for all to the infamous institutionalization. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amalia, for sharing such an important information about the ongoing process of developing UN guidelines and the important messages for state parties in implementing the convention. As already said, the institutionalization should be made a priority for all state parties. And I would like to emphasize that apart from bringing people out of institutions, we must also prevent further institutionalization. And I have seen a very important comment that development of early childhood interventions and focus on children with disabilities and preventing institutionalization of children is a really important part of all the institutionalization. Should be an important part of all the institutionalization processes across the world. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Stephen Allen, who is co-executive director of Validity Foundation, and also which is also a member of the Global Coalition of the Institutionalization. Stephen will tell us a bit more about the establishment of our coalition and our expectations from the guidelines on the institutionalization, as well as our commitment to support the committee in this process. Stephen, you have the floor.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's my real honor to join you today and to speak both on behalf of the Validity Foundation and the Global Coalition on Deinstitutionalization, who are collectively organizing today's side event. Indeed, I think this is a really important event coming on the sidelines of the Global Disability Summit. Today, we see representatives of governments, international organizations, persons with disabilities, and representative organizations worldwide coming together to reaffirm commitments to improve recognition and respect for the human rights of persons with disabilities. The Global Coalition on Deinstitutionalization is here to call for DI to be high on the agenda of all stakeholders now and for the coming months. I'm in awe at the possibility of having to speak after such a distinguished panel of speakers, but perhaps most in awe of those persons with disabilities on our panel today, Elisabetta and Bhargavi, who have worked tirelessly to promote what is actually a simple right, the right of all persons with disabilities to live independently and to be included in our communities. It sounds simple and basic, but as we all know, institutionalization and segregation of persons with disabilities worldwide remains all too common, whether in rich, developed nations or in developing countries in the global south. Institutions have this capacity for holding on and keeping control of the lives of people with disabilities. My organization and other members of the Global Coalition have seen too few countries getting to grip with the historic wrongs that have been perpetrated in the name of care and treatment of persons with disabilities. We experience all too often a worrying failure on the part of donors and decision makers to understand the profound changes required by the CRPD, and as so eloquently set out by the Vice Chair of the committee, Amalia, just now. I think there is also a perceptible reticence on the part of some to believe that change is possible or desirable. Medicalizing and disempowering notions concerning persons with disabilities continue to predominate, infecting laws, policies, and practices, condemning generation after generation to live in closed settings, isolated from society. The money, including vast sums of international development aid, continues to flow into institutions, both large and small, from Europe to the Americas, with worrying signs that new institutional settings are being created in Africa and Asia, and in countries where institutions sometimes have never existed before. The coalition and organizations of persons with disabilities should not have to continue making the argument that these policies are wrong. We shouldn't have to shout from the rooftops to ensure that people with disabilities who have experienced institutionalization themselves must be in the driving seat of change. And as advocates, we shouldn't have to work so hard to get the issue of independent living on the agenda of policymakers, including here at the Global Disability Summit. We are tired of experiencing distrust from policymakers, and we do not accept the argument that simply they do not understand alternatives to putting people into institutions. As you have heard from my brilliant colleagues Bhargavi and Dragana, the Global Coalition on Deinstitutionalization is formed of some of the leading organizations of persons with disabilities and civil society organizations operating around the world. We are united by our commitment to putting deinstitutionalization and the right to independent living high on the agenda, both here at the Global Disability Summit and far beyond. And we are deeply inspired and honored to collaborate with the CRPD committee in challenging these barriers and really ending institutionalization within our lifetime. We have all experienced the terrors of isolation and segregation due to the pandemic. It should now be sobering for all of us here to stop for a moment and realize just how dangerous institutions have become, particularly during the pandemic. We can't deny that there is now extensive evidence from countries worldwide that keeping people in these places, particularly during a pandemic, has cost lives. And there is now an obligation for us to resolve these problems. So on behalf of the Global Coalition on Deinstitutionalization and my own organization, and in the spirit of the summit, we commit to supporting the work of the CRPD committee as the guidelines continue to be developed. We expect that the guidelines will provide practical and concrete advice to states around the world on how to achieve our objective of deinstitutionalization and ensure true independent living. We also commit to supporting the widest ever public consultation in a United Nations process, ensuring that the voices of people with disabilities, and particularly those in institutions, are heard throughout the coming months, and as states commit to closing down their institutional architecture. We call on governments, donors, and all other relevant stakeholders to commit to implementing the guidelines when they are released later this year. We will support your genuine efforts to achieve independent living, but we will also speak out when things go wrong. With that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for articulating expectations of the Global Coalition on Deinstitutionalization and sharing these important messages. I would like to thank all of our distinguished speakers. I would like to thank Amalia as a driving force behind the process of developing UN guidelines on deinstitutionalization. And thank you all for participating in this important event. There was a question, and I think it would be good repeating that, Amalia, if you can. The question is, when are the guidelines going to be published for public consultations?
Yes, thank you, Dragana. Well, we are very close to publish them, but we are discussing so things, and I'm sure that in some days they will be published in the website of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Thank you very much, Amalia. I would also like to thank everyone on behalf of the Global Coalition on Deinstitutionalization and my own organization for joining us today. We will make sure that this process is widely distributed and that it reach each and every one of you present with us today, as well as all the people with disabilities and disability rights organizations globally. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to our interpreters and captioners, and I wish you a successful day and participation in the Global Disability Summit.